Now, for those of you who know about my professional experience, you'll understand and know that I've been working for the public sector for a very, very long time. Whether this is in a permanent 9 to 5, a inside IR35 contracting capacity, or independent consulting capacity, which is outside of IR35. Why does this keep on happening? Well, it makes sense. If I'm continuously doing these types of roles, then recruiters are more likely going to want to bring me in because I'm evidencing and showing capability within these different areas and providing value. Why am I talking about this? In the UK specifically, we pay taxes, a lot of taxes. Everywhere pays taxes, but we pay a lot of taxes. Now, say what you want about, the quality of the outputs that we get from those taxes, but a lot of those taxes goes towards the public sector. The public sector. In some ways, it's almost like these taxes are so high in order for us to justify and say that, well, we have a good public sector that provides us the value that we need. Now, that's definitely arguable. Of course, I'm going to say that. However, with that in mind, it means that there's opportunity. That's what that means. I was in environments before where many people, and people still to this day, don't respect or rate the public sector at all when it comes to opportunities, when it comes to their pay, when it comes to the things that you develop and learn. But what people don't realize, if you're not within this space, is that the amount of stuff that you learn and understand, the insider knowledge that you gain, the people that you connect with, is on a different level. It's on a different level. And it's not to say that you don't get the same thing within the private sector. Of course you do. But of course, definitely don't discount public sector. Now, of course, for anybody who follows any sort of like budgets, okay, so spring budget, autumn budget, etc., etc., you can clearly see where money is being pumped into. Okay, whether it's, so for example, a lot of money is continuously and consistently being pumped into the NHS or healthcare, not quite social care, but healthcare. Money has recently been pumped into the education sector. There are other sort of areas where money is being pumped into. And of course, globally, you can see that due to the rise in technology and stuff, there is going to be money pumped into those specific niche areas. And so it gives you an idea of what the priorities are when it comes to the public sector. Now, see it like this. If taxpayers are putting money towards these public sector services and they need to be stood up, they need experts who can deliver on this stuff. Not just anyone who wants to make money or whatever it may be. They need experts. Every single time I start a new assignment or I start a new contract or whatever it may be, I'm always thinking about the taxpayer. I have to. Because worst comes to worst, if an audit happens, I'm going to be first on the chopping block, being a consultant. Okay, because you're the first person they can point fingers at because you're indispensable in that way. But this video is just really to edify the opportunity. Now, as much as Keir Starmer talks about the fact that, looking to halve consultancy budget and all this kind of stuff in the next 4 years in his tenure and stuff, that may not necessarily affect the solopreneur, okay, the solo consultant or the small medium enterprise consultancy firm or whatever it may be. This, I believe at least anyway, is geared heavily more to firm consultants. Now, you can think what you will about firm consultants. Okay, they definitely have their place. But that is definitely what he's referring to a degree, because they have a hand in the market, so to speak. They've cornered it. Now, if this does become true, it means that there are more opportunity for SMEs and solopreneurs to make strides within this space. In fact, I think there were some, I wouldn't quite call them policies, but there were some new rules set in terms of how smaller and medium enterprises or consultants bid for work within the UK. That's promising, that's exciting. Although that is exciting, it does also mean that there's increased competition. But we can't be afraid of competition, because if you know you're good at what you do, if you've been doing it for a minimum of 5 years, if you've got a known methodology that you stick to, if you've got testimonials or accolades or whatever it may be, that evidences that you've done what you say you do really well, then why should you be scared? It's just like any other process. So you have to think to yourself, there is going to be continued need for consultants. I'm not going to quite say reliance, because I do believe that it's important for public sector organizations or private sector organizations to develop the skills and the confidence, should we say, to again start up projects themselves. But objectively speaking, it does make sense to get outsider help. And so this is why I always have this fundamental belief that consultants are going to be needed. Maybe not in the shape or guise that it looks like right now, but they're consistently and continually going to be needed. They just are. We're moving in that space, and this is why I badge this whole sort of like portfolio careers and everything else. So you have to look for, or you should at least look for, don't discount opportunities within the public sector at all. Just don't do it, okay? Whether this is as a procurement opportunity or as an independent consultant via an agency, whatever it may be. The other thing I'd say is, again, this can be true for anything, but within the public sector, there are a lot of purpose-driven and impactful-driven sort of like initiatives that you can really get your teeth into. You know, these could be as low as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million pound projects up to 100, 200 million pound projects, okay, or programs. And so there is a rewarding aspect that you can have to it that kind of fits in with maybe certain goals that you're aiming to fulfill. This could be UN goals, it could be ESG goals, etc., etc. So bear that in mind. There's a purpose-driven sort of aspect to it as well. The other thing I want to say is that within the public sector, you do have connections to high-profile individuals, okay? Depending on what sort of role that you're doing. So if you are in senior management, maybe even middle management potentially, you do have individuals who, again, speak to certain political individuals or speak to certain people who have certain types of power within certain spaces. You connect with different consultants and other contractors within the space. So the public sector is a pool of opportunity when it comes to networking, because you're meeting so many different types of talented individuals who are trying to make this thing work. Again, I can't talk heavily about the private sector because that's not really sort of like my area. The only private work I've really done has either been charitable or it has been sort of like B2C. So it's been slightly different in that way. I'd also like to touch on a point or fact that because it is the public sector and because it's relying on sort of like, I want to say the public purse and taxes and all that kind of stuff there is a certain level of predictability that comes with it. Okay, what I mean by that is, you know there is going to be some sort of planning round or business case or whatever it may be, that needs to be submitted by the end of March each year at least. Okay, and so with that in mind, okay, you either start planning for your next opportunity or you're bidding for a new opportunity once funding has been confirmed, whatever it may be. But there is a certain level of predictability. I'm not going to say there's complete predictability because I don't think that's true. But you can kind of plan for those fluctuations because it follows the economic cycles. It follows that stuff, And with that in mind, it puts you in a position where you can have a bit of predictability. Let's say, for example, you're applying direct as an independent consultant to the end client organization via a framework or procurement channel. Okay, so this is where you bid or tender for work. There is definitely a predictability with that. There has to be, because there are certain procurement rules in place that require you to be in that space. The smart thing to do is to have a mix between sort of like these bigger contracts, okay, and these solo sort of like contracts that pop up from a consulting standpoint, because it means you can have like the big fish here, but the small little fish here and there that keeps you going day to day, and this kind of boosts you. The more you do it, the more this can become the main thing, and then you can grow bigger if that is your aim. So again, things to consider. Another thing I want to say is that in the public sector, typically, at least anyway, I'm imagining there is I can't say this as a comparison, but there is definitely a diverse set of people there. Now, is it completely diverse? Well, depends what you mean by diverse. If you're talking about sort of like racially, it depends where you are, if I'm honest with you. I know in the NHS, that's definitely diverse, but if I compare that to other organizations that I work for, not as diverse. And I felt it, okay? If we're talking about gender or sex or anything like that, again, it varies depending on what sort of like department you're working for. However, there is, or should be at least, a commitment to that type of diversity. Even though I've seen that the world is changing now and everything else, I would imagine there is more of a sort of like emphasis on making sure that there is a certain level of equity that exists. So, this was all just to say that the public sector has opportunities. Do not ignore it. If you're looking to get into contracting or whatever it may be, you can check out a recruitment site called Public Sector Resourcing. They are the preferred provider for the government that essentially offers contracting roles and opportunities. Why am I talking about contracting when I talk about portfolio careers quite a bit? Because I feel like contracting is a great way in. I really do believe that, Now, some people may say, well, there's an opportunity cost here. And, if you don't make over, let's say, between 550 to 600 a day, then there's no point, whatever it may be. I guess that's in context to what you were doing before and what you calculate and everything else. There are pros and cons. But the mindset that I want people to adopt, which, is the consultant mindset, is essentially one where you know how to fend for yourself. You're not reliant on an organization. You are betting on yourself. That's the whole aim. That's the whole focus. And so this is why I advocate for contracting as an initial start point, at least anyway. And the public sector is a great place to start because there are always going to be consulting or contracting opportunities. Some more obvious, some less obvious, but they're there. Okay, they're there. So hopefully this has given you a bit of a perspective. Hopefully you don't knock the public sector too tough, but I understand it is troublesome for some because, again, look at the state of affairs within the UK right now. It feels very troublesome, should we say, and frustrating. And I don't blame people for wanting to go and live in Thailand or Singapore or whatever it may be. But it'd be nice to know that there potentially is an opportunity that we can create for ourselves, at least in some way, shape or form. But maybe that's another topic for another day. If you've got any thoughts or comments on this specific topic, I'd be very interested to hear. I'm trying to catch up with all my comments. There's a lot. So I'm doing my best. But if you want to see any more videos centered around portfolio careers, contracting, leadership, resilience, all of that kind of stuff, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.